Good morning, gang. Hope everyone's doing all right. We will get started here in a second. My name's Rip. If you don't know me, I will be your moderator today. I'm sure I'll repeat this a couple times before we get started, but I just wanted to give everyone a quick heads up. My elderly neighbor just called and said his wife is having some sort of emergency, so they're going to bring their dog over, and I may need to step away for a minute or two to try and help out. So if I disappear briefly, I'll be right back. We'll just keep the conversation going. I do appreciate everyone's understanding on that. Cool. We will get started as soon as Brandon gets here. I'm going to turn off my camera just for a second. I will be right back with you guys. Hey, Brandon, how you doing?
Hi, Rip. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Great to see you.
Great to see you as well. I'm not sure if we've met before. Maybe we have.
We have briefly a long time ago, I think, but I'm glad to spend this time with you. I was excited when they asked me to do it for sure. Um,
Awesome.
Cool. So we'll get started here in a second. I do want to, I kind of let everybody know previously, and I hate to do this. Quick heads up, though. My elderly neighbor just called me and said his wife is having some sort of emergency and asked me to watch their dog. So if I step away for a second, we'll just keep the conversation going, and I'll be right back. I just something I have to deal with.
Totally, totally fine. I appreciate the heads up, just so I
Yeah, I
know.
appreciate you guys understanding. It's one of those things, right? Definitely unprepared for, but I'm willing now. So
That's
cool. Well, from what I can tell, today's Zoom webinar is demystifying production, which I think is awesome. That's a fun one.
mm.
Cool. Before we get started, do you mind telling us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So I see someone says we can't script life. Oh yeah, that's a good comment there for sure. But yeah, so anyway, my background, my name is Brandon Tambori. I'm a filmmaker and producer. I started my career working for a company called Palmstar, which is a production and finance company. So they would not only creatively produce movies, but they would also oversee the financing and the entire business side of the production. So I got a lot of hands-on experience just working on how to actually put together a film and more specifically an independent film. Palmstar did the first two John Wick films. They did Hereditary with A24, which I was an associate producer on. And around that same time Hereditary came out, they acquired the comedy brand National Lampoon, which was super exciting to me because I've always been a lifelong comedy fan, and that's where I wanted my career to be in comedy. So a lot of my time over the last couple of years I was there was focused on the National Lampoon side of the business. It was initially supposed to be feature films, but then they ended up pivoting into digital content, podcasts, live comedy, that kind of stuff. And I thought that was great, but I wanted to work on feature films again. So I left there, started my own production company called Joke Zero, and I was going to focus specifically on comedy feature films, at least at first, and then eventually expand into all comedy content. So my first feature film that I fully produced under Joke Zero is called Plan B. It came out in almost a year ago, September 27th, 2024. The film was released on 9 screens and on VOD, and now it's streaming on Amazon Prime and also on Tubi if you don't have Amazon Prime.
That is one of my favorite modern movies, man. I am actually kind of blown away that I'm talking to you right now. That's such a great. I'm a huge fan of the on a personal note of the raunchy high school comedy, and that one did it so well. I'm sort of floored that you were involved with that. That's amazing. Oh, very cool. Awesome, man. Well, cool. So I've got a bunch of questions for you that I wrote out. So we'll go through them. If anybody in the any of our attendees have any questions, please write them in the there's a Q&A box. Put them up in there. I will make sure we get to them as best we can. But let's go ahead and get started. So my first question for you, in general, what are the different departments on a production team and what are their responsibilities?
So there's definitely many different types of departments on film. So I will just kind of go over a brief, I'd say, checklist of all of them, and then you can chime in and hear what you'd want to hear more about. Um, but so there's the camera department, which is really like camera, and then sometimes grip and electric are also put into there. But the camera would be the director of photography or cinematographer would be the really the department head there, and they would really oversee that whole department on crafting like what the film actually looks like, what camera lenses are used to shoot the film, and not only that but also just the lighting, because the lighting is super important as well. You could have a super expensive really nice top of the line camera, and if the lighting in the room or the lighting outside isn't set up properly, it's still not going to look that good. Another really important department on a production is the just production design and set design. So a production designer is usually in charge of that, and they will set up set up the set, I'll say. So say if you're filming in a bedroom, they will be the one to come in and just decorate the entire set and make sure that it looks good. There's usually like a set decorator could work under them, and maybe some other people in that department as well. There's a costume department, which usually the head is the costume designer. That person is responsible for all of the costumes and the wardrobe that each character wears. There's the makeup department, which is in charge of all of the makeup and just the different types of looks. Then there's also like an actual, I'd say like physical production set, which say like production manager, unit production manager. There's usually like a production supervisor, production coordinator, production assistants will usually work in that department as well. There's an art department where usually a prop master would work in there. Sometimes that would be built in with the production design or set design, things like that. There's a sound department, which is super important on a production because you always want to make sure that you have sound that sounds professional quality, even on an independent film. Like if you turn on a movie and the sound isn't great, it's kind of going to take you out of that experience a little bit. So usually on set, there's a an actual sound recorder, or sound mixer, some people call it, and then sometimes a boom operator as well, who's the person that you'll see holding that boom mic. There's also potentially on the whatever kind of movie it is, a visual effects department. Like my film didn't have a ton of visual effects. We did some minor things in post production, but if you have a big action movie or superhero movie or something, there's going to be visual effects department that's super important. Um, and then there's also a bunch of other departments in post production. I don't know if you want to really get into that just because I know we're mainly focused on actual production. And I'm not sure if any of the attendees had joined previously, but we initially did a webinar that was just covering just making a feature film from script to actually distribution. And then we did one that was pre-production, and then this is supposed to be production, and then we're going to do another one at some point that is for post-production.
Perfect. Awesome. That was awesome, man. Thank you. So what does a typical day on a set look like?
So, a day on a set, I'm going to just go from my background, at least with the film Plan B, where I was a director and also a producer. So, a day on a set, typically, you wake up, there's a very early call time for the most part. I think for this film, Plan B, that was my most recent, so I'm just going to use that as an example. But we probably had like 6 a.m. call time for the most part, or maybe 7 a.m. I would get there and maybe there'd be one or two other people there, like the UPM potentially would be there, or line producer, and then like catering would be set up with breakfast. So you're usually in some kind of holding room for a little bit. You can pick up your schedule, which is also usually emailed to you the night before. And for me as the director, I would go over all the scenes. And these are things, it's not like it's news to me. Like I was in charge of actually setting up the schedule. So it was more so just getting a refresher of getting like a printed out schedule of what we were filming those days. Then I would meet with the actors in the morning to go over the scenes, just rehearse a little bit, see if there are any questions that popped up throughout the duration of the shoot. And I'm sorry, just any questions about the specific scenes that we were filming that day. And then I would usually have breakfast with the cinematographer and maybe production designer, whoever else was in there in terms of department heads. And we just have breakfast in the holding room and just go over all the scenes we were shooting that day, going over our shot list and the different looks that we were trying to accomplish that day. And then from there, really, it's just going down the list of all of the scenes. And on an independent film like this, we had a 15-day shoot, for a script that was, I think, maybe around 100 pages, 97 pages, I forget exactly, but it was a pretty ambitious shoot to do an entire feature in 15 days. A lot of, like, I'd say an average movie might be closer to 30. And sometimes if you're on an indie, it might be 20 days, 20 to 30. If it's a big Marvel movie, it might be 90 days or something like that. But for 15 days, we're typically shooting at least like 7, 10 pages a day on certain days, which is a lot. So it really is just a lot to pack in. And typically, at least on my film, we had a lot of different locations and we're doing a lot of location moves and things like that, which takes up a lot of the day as well. It's crazy how little of the day is actually spent filming, and a lot more of it is just setting up cameras and driving around to different locations.
I can only imagine. um, so we're obviously this is roadmap writers. Many of us are writers first. So if a writer who, let's say, is not the director is on the set, what is their role or job there? What are the things they definitely should and shouldn't be doing?
So I would say once you're the writer and if you're on set and you're not directing. So for Plan B, I was doing both, but I've also been on sets where I was not the director and I was not the writer, but the writer was actually there. So one example of a movie that I worked on that I'll bring up is this film called The Catcher Was a Spy. So this is one of the first movies I worked on, and I was just an assistant on this movie. And the we were filming this specific day was filming at Fenway Park, which was really cool. The movie is about Mo Berg, who is a baseball player back in the 1930s who ends up leaving the Boston Red Sox to go help the United States in World War II. So it's a really cool true story. And the writer of that script was actually there. He came to set that day. And on a bigger film like that, it's kind of just like a set visitation where it's like fun to be there. And I'd say that if you're the writer, really just enjoy it and take it in. You don't want to get overly, I'd say, involved. Like you don't want to step on any toes, essentially. There's going to be producers, there's going to be directors. Like it's totally fine to go interact. And maybe depending on your relationship with the producers or director, you could potentially go in and make a suggestion or something. But for the most part, I think you just want to sit there, enjoy the show, and just be happy that your project is coming to life. That is more so if you're just the writer and they just say, hey, we're filming, you want to come to set. There are also other instances where, especially for a comedy film, which is mainly what I work on, that if you're a comedy writer, maybe the director, the producers would be like, hey, the director likes to work with some improv, or the cast might be comedians who like to work with improv. Would you want to come to set and maybe you could just throw some joke ideas out there, like while we're shooting, and who knows, maybe some of them will come into play and actually end up in the film. So that's definitely something I've heard. I haven't personally done it, but I've had some comedy filmmaker friends who are comedy writers that have been on set and they actually are there for the purpose of pitching jokes.
That sounds awesome. Which I guess brings me to my next question, which is, as a writer, how do you handle the script changes and rewrites during production?
So I'll go back into Plan B, for example, because we definitely had quite a bit of script changes throughout the production, and some of them are more so maybe you're rehearsing with the actor in the morning or the night before, and for some reason, just something isn't working, and you're like, okay, I have to change this. Then there may be some other times where maybe you need to change it because of a location. Like, for example, I remember when we were shooting Plan B, there was trying to think of a specific example. Uh, so yeah, we had an issue with one of our locations and we weren't going to be able to get there. And I had to essentially rewrite the scene to take place in one of the locations we already had. So it was supposed to take place in someone's apartment and we were going to lose access to that location. So I was like, okay, we have access to a coffee shop. We're supposed to film there tomorrow. I have to rewrite the scene to take place in the coffee shop. And it wasn't anything crazy, but I did actually need to rework the script a little bit in order to make it so that the scene was at the coffee shop and also make it make sense that it's at the coffee shop. So that's definitely one thing I'd say you always need to just be on your toes, on the edge of your seat, be prepared for anything because you never know. Like it could be a change that you want to make because again, something's not working, but it might be a change that you don't necessarily want to make, but you have to make. It could be, like I mentioned, a location not working out. It could be an issue with an actor or an actress who maybe they have an issue and they're late to set, or they get sick and they have to cancel. You never really know. So there's always a bunch of different changes that may have to pop up. And as a writer, just always be prepared and maybe even have some backups. For me, also with comedy, there were definitely some jokes I had where I was thinking, this joke is funny on the page, but it might not land. So there were certain scenes and jokes that I had written where I had like a list of backup jokes. And that way, when we were filming, we'd get one take, and I'm like, okay, get rid of this one liner and throw this in instead.
That was what my next question was going to be, is about like killing, as a comedy writer. I know killing your darlings is a rough, it can be a task for sure. Or those jokes you love but maybe don't fit or don't work or whatever the reason, you can't film them. So that is interesting. Um, cool. So my next question would be, what is your advice for writers who are about to be first time directors?
I would I would say, and this was super important for me, and I didn't even learn this when I first started shooting Plan B, but I kind of learned it throughout the whole those 15 days that I mentioned, is to just like be confident and show people that you actually are the leader. Like you're in charge, because if you don't believe in yourself, how are other people going to believe in yourself? And sometimes it isn't intimidating. Like I remember being on set, and I'm 31 years old, but when we filmed this movie, I was 27, and I was younger than some of our PAs. And some of these actors we're working with are people who had been in the industry for many, many years. And some of it, I was like a little bit intimidated to like give notes to some of these actors sometimes, where I'm like, okay, this is what I want, but should this person really be taking orders from me? And that's kind of just the thought you have in your head. But then once you realize, like, yes, like all of these people are here believing in my project and my vision, you have to believe in your own vision too, just because if you don't, how is anyone else going to believe in it?
I love that. Cool. Well, I'm gonna open this up to any questions from our attendees. Feel free to put them in the Q&A box. On a personal note, just because I'm curious, my memory, Plan B was like you got that. What was the green lighting process like for that, pitching that thing? From what I remember, you guys partnered with American High Productions. Is that correct?
No, so actually it was an independent production. And now thinking about it, there actually is a different Plan B movie that you may be getting confused
That's
with.
probably what it is.
But because yeah, I am aware of that film. But
Okay.
regardless, so we ended up, it was a true independent film, and there really was no greenlighting process. So the greenlighting process for me was I had a script, I put together a business plan, and I independently went to potential investors. I started off with like a friends and family round, and it's not like I have any friends or family who really are like these rich people who had invested in movies before. It was more so like, hey, I'm doing this. Anyone want to put in some money, and getting like $5,000 here from one person and maybe another 5,000 from someone else. And I got a bunch of people to come in that way. And then once I had an actual like decent amount of money built up, I was able to go to some people within the industry and say, "Hey, I have some money. I have this script that a lot of people like." And then we were able to actually get it greenlit that way. But it really was just a process of kind of a snowball effect of bringing in more and more investors. There's over 30 investors in the film. And then once we actually filmed it, it wasn't until the movie was 100% complete that we ended up actually selling the film to Quiver Distribution, who actually released the film in the US. And now the movie was released in some theaters, and it's available now on Amazon Prime, which is really exciting.
That's amazing. Uh, how did you go about getting some of those bigger names attached? You had some big names in that film, so I'm just curious how that even went
Yeah,
about.
so I'll tell a funny story to start, because I imagine a lot of the writers who are in this webinar right now are maybe unproduced writers, and particularly like haven't actually directed a film before. But so for me, I was very precious with this script. A lot of people really liked it, and I was getting like great reads from people within the industry. But at the same time, was a little hesitant to bring other people involved, because it really was like my baby. That's how I viewed it. So I was myself just reaching out to agents, calling agencies, and trying to get cast on board and move the needle on the project. And when I was speaking to agents, they would be like, "Oh, cool, it sounds really great. Like, who's directing?" And then I would tell them that I was directing, and they knew that I also wrote the script, and they knew I was the lead producer. So it just seemed like it was like an amateur movie, like it wasn't even a real film. So as I went down the process a little bit, I ended up bringing on another producer who was more experienced in that. So that's one thing I would really recommend to writers. Try to find a producer who actually has not only credits on their IMDb page or whatever it is, but like actual experience. There's so many different kind of producers on a movie, and I specifically needed a producer who had experience dealing with agents and attaching cast to films. So I ended up bringing on a producer. His name is DJ Dodd, and he was super helpful in getting a lot of those cast attached because he had produced like 40 or so films and had worked with some A-list talent. So pretty much I just said to him, like him and I were talking about the cast, and he asked me who I really wanted. And say like John Heater, for example, who we had in the film, and he's stars in Napoleon Dynamite as Napoleon Dynamite himself. He was one of my first choices from actually writing the script. I made a pitch deck for this movie, and John Heater was actually in the pitch deck, like is one of the like an ideal casting option for the role. And DJ said John Heater actually seems like pretty realistic. He does a lot of independent films, and he obviously does a lot of comedy. So he just said like, yeah, why not? Let's just take a shot. And we reached out to John Heater. Just DJ called up his agent, and John Heater read the script and then really liked it, and he wanted to meet with me. So him and I had a virtual meeting, and after that meeting, he just said, "Yeah, I'm in." And then once we got John Heater, the rest of the cast, it became much easier because it went from just a comedy script to like a John Heater comedy movie. And I forget the actual order of how everyone came in, but we were able to get Shannon Elizabeth, who is from American Pie and Scary Movie and so many other great comedies. Kate Flannery, who starred in The Office for the entire run of the show. Jamie Lee, who's the lead in the film, she actually came on first. So she was on before John Heater. And that she was actually on board before DJ as well. So I was able to at least use my resources to be able to get Jamie to come on board. And she was a very, I'd say, successful stand-up comedian and writer and producer for Ted Lasso and a bunch of other TV shows. And she starred in the HBO show Crashing, which I was a huge fan of as a comedy nerd and comedy fan. So once I got Jamie on board, that again gives you some credibility just having an actual cast member on board. And she hadn't really starred in a movie before. Like I mentioned, she was in Crashing. She had all these great credits as a writer and producer and was a successful stand-up, but she didn't really have that like leading role in a movie. And I feel like a lot of people within the industry and even outside of the industry was just like, wow, Jamie's super funny. She feels like someone who is ready for this breakout role. And I think John Heater felt that as well. Like, okay, like this seems like someone who really could break out and I'd want to star in a movie with. And then just the two of them together, they had great chemistry. And I think that helped get a lot of the others. I forgot to mention Tom Berenger too, Oscar nominated actor, Golden Globe winner, and Emmy winner. So it was awesome to work with Tom Berenger. And that was actually DJ's idea for sure. Tom wasn't someone I thought of, and he was like, sometimes when you have a role like that, where Tom Berenger, he's not in the movie that much. He's maybe in it for 15 minutes or so, but it's easy to shoot. So Tom came in and we only filmed him for 2 days. And that's another really big piece of advice I would say for anyone who is one, either directing a movie or producing a movie, but also if you're writing a script, like have some of these interesting supporting characters that film a lot of their scenes in one location or two locations because that's the kind of role that you can get someone like Tom Berenger to come in for 2 days. Like we had this as a lower budget independent film, but we wouldn't necessarily have been able to afford someone like Tom Berenger to come in and work for 3 weeks, but we could afford him to come in for 2 days, and it just really adds a lot of credibility to the movie, and it's really fun to be able to work with someone like Tom Berenger.
I can only imagine. He's a legend. Cool. So my next question would be, what are the most common mistakes you see new filmmakers or producers make on set?
Did you say make on set?
Yeah.
Okay. So I would say this can kind of tie in a little bit to what I mentioned before about like not necessarily almost like imposter syndrome, like not realizing that you're the one in charge because there were certain times where myself on Plan B is not only the director but also the lead producer, and I was the only producer who was actually on set for the movie. So I wouldn't recommend that at all. Definitely have another producer on set if you're if you're directing a film. But one mistake that I would say I made is just again not not fully realizing that I'm actually the one in charge and that I don't really have anyone to take orders from, because there were certain times where I was the lead decision maker and maybe I shared some information with a crew member or a cast member that I really shouldn't have. Like maybe it was information that the director could comfortably talk to an actor about, but the producer should not. Where I'm looking at the schedule and saying like, wow, we're definitely going into overtime today. And then maybe a crew member hears me say that. And then that uh, kind of just kills the morale for the whole day. Like, oh, geez, it's going to be a long day. Everyone likes being on set, but nobody really wants to ever work overtime. Like, you think, yeah, you get paid extra for it, it's more work. But when you're working these 12-hour days, like overtime, anything over 12 hours, like that's pretty brutal. So I would say that that is definitely one mistake. And two, and this is more so for, I'd say, a producer, is overstepping your boundaries a little bit. And we talked about it slightly with the potentially a writer coming on set, but with a producer, you don't want to be too controlling. Like the producer is the one totally in charge for the most part. Like they're the one who brings the director on, brings all the actors on, sets everything up. But the producer role, although creative, you're really trusting the director with actually shooting all of the scenes and the actors to act in it. So I would say one thing I've seen from producers is trying to get too involved and going to the director and trying to give the director notes, also talking directly to the cast, which in most cases is totally fine. But if you have a director on board, the producer should not really be going up and talking to the cast and giving them notes without the director knowing. So I've definitely seen some producers do that on films, and it's something that a lot of people don't like. Even though some producers are great and some producers are very creative for whatever reason, specifically actors feel like producers are like suits and just business people. I've seen that a lot, but there are a lot of really good producers who are super creative and give some really good inputs. And I've worked as a producer as well, and I view myself as a creative person. And it's still just important to like know your place on set. I think is mainly the key for that entire thing.
That
Know
makes sense. Yeah, completely. Just kind of speaking on that, how do you manage the conflicts when different departments like creative versus technical have competing priorities?
um So there's definitely a couple different ways to do it. I would say to always just be calm. You never want anything to actually end in a fight. But there were certainly, I'm thinking one time in particular on Plan B where there was an issue with, I think one of the actors was having an issue with one of the crew members. And the actor came up to me and was like, "Hey, yeah, I'm not really liking what this crew member is doing." And I needed to somehow, I'm like, okay, so I'm going to talk to the crew member about it. So I needed to go and talk to that crew member and be like, look, nothing bad, nothing too bad, but just like you've been doing this thing and it's kind of getting on this one actor's nerve a little bit. So can you tone it down a little bit? And then they're like, yeah, sure. Like, and the crew member was super like responsive and cooperative about it. And we ended up then setting up a group meeting for all of us with me, the actor, and the crew member, where we really just came up with a game plan on like the best way to move forward and get everything done. So I'd say I'd just be willing to adapt. Like everyone has different ways of working, and you're always going to want to please everybody, but there are a lot of compromises on a movie set. Like there's a could be 100 people on the set, could be 200. I think for Plan B, a lot of times the actual crew was pretty small. We maybe had like 25, 30 people that were there every day, plus some more actors depending on how many days it was. But yeah, just be willing to kind of be ready to be the mediator, I would say.
Just talking to you, I'm just so interested. When Plan B was finished, what was your Plan A for getting it out there into the world? Like, how did you come up with a game plan for
So when I before I even shot the movie, I had what was an ideal game plan. Now I know that it was totally different and not that realistic, which a lot of filmmakers should know as well. But my plan was that I was going to get the movie into Sundance or one of these top film festivals, and it was going to sell it to a top distributor. And I worked on the movie Hereditary that I mentioned with A24. So I was an associate producer on that film, and I got to see firsthand like the ideal scenario. So that was like a truly independent film. It was made for pretty low budget, and it got into Sundance, and A24 ended up picking it up and gave it a wide release, and it made over $80 million at the box office. So that was like my first experience really being involved in a movie, and I've learned now that very rarely does that ever happen. That was like the one in a million, like lightning in a bottle thing. But when I was working on that, I was thinking like, wow, this is not that difficult. You just make a movie and it's going to get into Sundance, and then you're going to be able to sell it for a lot of money and make another movie. So with Plan B, we finished the movie and it didn't get into Sundance and it really didn't get into any of the top festivals, which was a bit of a bummer. But at that point, I still had a good network of potential sales agents, and the other producers I had a good network of sales agents too. So once the movie was actually totally finished, we started reaching out to sales agents. And we pretty much just threw the film out there for everybody. We cut together like a teaser trailer for it, and at that point, we got quite a few offers for it where sales agents were interested in coming on board. And we were also prepared to go directly to distributors if we didn't get a sales agent. But after talking to the sales agents, we ended up bringing on a company called Premier Entertainment Group. And Premier just seemed like they had a lot of good contacts in the industry. They weren't only focused on the US, they were also focused on international, which was exciting too, because now Plan B has come out in I think like six foreign territories. And I had a friend recently who told me that they were like flying to Iceland and it was available on the plane. So it's really cool just to get the film out there. So Premiere was great for that, being able to get the film out into just like the wide marketplace. And again, we decided to go with the sales agent. And then at that point, we pretty much just deliver the film to the sales agent. And then it's the sales agent's responsibility to find buyers in not only the US, but other countries as well. But I was still very involved in that process, and I was at least able to have some approvals. I wasn't that precious with the international territories because I was just excited to get foreign releases. But for the US, we did get quite a few offers, and I was involved in the process of like talking to some of the potential distributors and seeing what their game plan was for actually releasing the film. And we ended up going with Quiver Distribution. And I felt like Quiver had a great library of films, and I liked what they were going to do with it. And I think they've done a great job so far. And it has been almost a year, and the film is still it's still out there in the world. So hopefully people continue to watch it and it continues to get more fans and more audiences over the next several years.
That's awesome. I really only got one more question for you. We don't really have very many in the Q&A, so if anybody has any, please post them. But one of them I would have would be based on your experience with Plan B. What do you take from that going forward, moving forward? Like, what are some of the more important lessons you could share with us from that experience?
So I guess I'll go into a couple different ones. One lesson I would say that like if you really want to make the movie or your script or whatever it is, if you keep working at it, like I truly believe that it will happen, but you want to go in with it with like realistic expectations. So Plan B was not the first script that I've ever written. It was actually the third. The first two scripts that I've written before Plan B were like these bigger budget comedies where they would cost like 10 million, 20, 30 billion dollars to make. And as I got some more experience in the industry, I was like, like it's pretty difficult to get a movie like this made even without a first-time filmmaker. So with someone like me on board, like it makes sense to try to do something more really like more feasible. So I wrote Plan B with the intention of actually being able to shoot it at some point. So I was like, okay, maybe I could get $1 million from somebody or a group of people or less than that, but I wanted to be able to write a script that was going to be like somewhat easy to shoot. So when I say easy to shoot, and this is super important for all the writers out there because I see this so many times with I don't want to say inexperienced writers, but even unproduced writers and first time writers. But just having a script that is very, very difficult to shoot in terms of having one locations. So the less locations you have, the easier it is to shoot. So Plan B, if anyone has seen it, there are actually quite a bit of locations. I probably want a little bit too much of them, but for the most part, a lot of the film is takes place in an apartment. And that's easy to shoot because you just go in an apartment and you have a handful of characters in there and there's a few different rooms you could shoot in. Like we do also have a scene in a nightclub. We have a scene that involves like a musical performance where John Heater is in a band and singing. Like some of these things are a little bit, or we have a scene in a hospital. We have a scene where the main character is giving birth. Like those are scenes I wouldn't totally recommend putting into like a script, especially from a first time writer. But if you can write something that just seems to be smaller in scale and really just try to focus on the story and the characters, That's something that I think is makes your film much more easy to produce. Besides the locations, also the characters. Like if you have 100 characters in your script, it's more expensive to shoot because, like paying for locations, you need to pay every single actor. So you have 100 actors or you have 10 actors, it's obviously way cheaper to only have 10 actors. So keeping the characters down, keeping the locations down, keeping down things that just seem expensive, like car chases or gun shootouts and things like that, airplanes. You can just think of some or animals. We had a cat in the film, and it was kind of expensive and difficult to work with the cat just because it's not as easy to get a cat or any animal to actually take direction. So when you want to film a scene, it might take an extra hour or 2 hours if it has a cat in it, or has a dog in it, or a bird, or whatever the animal may be. So just try to keep your scripts pretty bare bones and easy to shoot. Keep the logistics down, and I think that will really help getting something made. And I know I kind of went on a tangent, a little ramble there. I'm trying to realize if I even answered your question.
You absolutely did. That was fantastic. No, seriously, that was wonderful. Um, cool, man. Well, I don't want to take up any more of your time. It looks like all our questions have been answered. I appreciate everything. Everybody needs to go see Plan B. From what I see, that you also offer some consultations through Roadmap. I would obviously encourage everyone. You seem incredibly knowledgeable, man. I will probably do that myself. So great. It was so wonderful meeting you. Thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, it was my pleasure. And anyone who's in right now, I see we have quite a bit of participants. If there's any other questions, well, now you have another minute or so before we sign off to ask them. But otherwise, feel free to shoot me an email or a message on LinkedIn, or like Rip mentioned, I am available for one-on-one consultations through Roadmap. So I do quite a bit of those, sometimes with screenwriters where I'm actually reading your script and giving you notes and things like that. Other times people are more interested in just general career advice, like, hey, here's my script. What would you do to help me make this? And not that I'm going to necessarily help make it, but I will be able to at least, I think for the most part, point you in the right direction of like what I would do if it was my script and how I would go about getting it made.
Awesome, Brandon. Thank you so much. Everybody, thank you for joining us and enjoy what's left of the weekend.
Yep. Thanks again, Rip.
Absolutely. Bye, guys.
Everyone for joining.